overarching question that came up for me: how do we lead ourselves well? How do we lead the ones that we love well? How do we lead the aspects of ourselves that I would say are rather a little bit more adaptive from childhood, and ensure that the wise adult in us actually is on the front row and is driving the car?
The things that I thought I really wanted, I had largely achieved them by the time I was 30 years old. And then it was this weight that just landed inside of me where I was like, oh, like if I did all of those things already, like what is the rest of life? And then a grenade went off in my head. The lights went out and I passed out. And I just remember blurry vision, loud music, and I get goosebumps. For the first moment in my life, I was actually afraid for my life. I didn't know what happened. I was no longer in control, or I thought I was in control, and I was scared. My entire ego was wrapped up in being this successful entrepreneur, this athlete, so fit and having it all together. And in this other side was just this like really deep pain. And I was like, I can't do it anymore. And everything in me wanted to break down. I didn't have the tools and I didn't have the support that I was aware of at the time to really go into that pain. It brings me sadness because I probably had people in my life that would have been there for me. I just didn't know how to ask. I didn't know how to open up to that. I had never touched feelings.
These initiatory events are experiences that we'll all go through. And I personally believe they are here to allow us to mature, to evolve, to grow, to deepen into our understanding of who we really are, but also why we're really here. Like, this is really what these experiences are here for.
Welcome to the Heart of Man podcast, a podcast for any man seeking to live in alignment with his deepest core and lead a life of profound meaning and connection. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and I'm here to empower you through transformative conversations, eye-opening insights, and practical wisdom. Join me now as we venture into the heart of man. Let's dive in.
All right, Chris Marhefka, it's an absolute pleasure to be sitting here with you today. I welcome you on the Heart of Man.
Thank you, Alex. So glad to be here, man.
I was incredibly excited for our conversation, to be seeing you and as well have a conversation around your story, around essentially the journey that you had to go through after a stress-induced injury, and as well all the lessons that have come from that, and as well the way that I see you leading yourself and as well your family and as well your community as a result of that. And before I came here today, I reflected on the fact that when I had just revisited your story and experiences that you went through, the overarching question that came up for me, and you let me know if it resonates for you, is how do we lead ourselves well? How do we lead the ones that we love well? How do we lead the aspects of ourselves that I would say are rather a little bit more adaptive from childhood, and ensure that the wise adult in us actually is on the front row and is driving the car? How do we ensure that every aspect of ourselves is being met in a very holistic way, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, relational, spiritual, sexual, financial? So there's all these aspects. How can we lead a relationship to life with a sense of grace and ease? And how can we listen deeply to the whisper of what's here, what's alive? So I know I set, a strong frame with that question.
Yeah.
So feel free to comment on anything that might be here. But where I would like to begin here with you today, Chris, is bringing us back to where everything began for you, and essentially hearing the origins of what led you down this path of healing after this injury that you experienced. And so to offer our listeners a little bit of context, bring us back to a decade ago when you were operating as a serial entrepreneur, when you were building businesses. What initially led you down this path? And on a deeper level, what was as well driving you and motivating you at that stage?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, a decade ago, I would have been 29 years old. And early in my 20s, I found entrepreneurship. It found me. and From the start, I knew that I wanted to create something that was greater than myself. Before I had a word for it, like legacy, I knew that that was within me. I had the capability to do that. And so I found entrepreneurship and I started building businesses, and mostly in the like the health and the fitness and the wellness world. And um, at 29, it's ironic that you say a decade, because that was right around the time that my entire life changed. um, I was always a achiever throughout my entire life, whether it was academics or sports. I was always achieving to be the best for me, and you know, I did that in a lot of ways. I was always setting goals, and I remember this so vividly. Every year I would do this right around my birthday, which is in December. And so it always fit really well with like beginning of the new year. I would always sit down by myself and I would reflect on the year that I had. I had a spreadsheet. I still have the spreadsheet, all the goals I would set for myself, and it was across the board. It was business, it was financial, it was relational, it was health, and just other achievements. And I'd reflect on what I achieved. I reflect on maybe what I didn't, and I would set a vision for my next year, the next year ahead. And I remember doing this very vividly at 29, because so many of my goals had my 30th birthday as like the deadline. I used to have like timelines and deadlines, and like all of these like big picture life goals had 30 years old. And what I realized when I was sitting down was I had achieved almost all of the what I would call now material egoic, like the things that I thought I really wanted. I had largely achieved them by the time I was 30 years old. And it was uh, partly a celebration, but back then, even way harder on myself than I am now. But it was so not much celebration, but it was like, yeah, great. And then it was this weight that just landed inside of me where it was like, oh, like if I did all of those things already, like what is the rest of life? And almost like divine grace, this question and this contemplation came in around like, what else is there besides like doing this thing and walking this human journey and checking all these boxes. And I was like, I didn't have an answer. And so I remember sitting there for the first time conflicted to like set these goals. It was like, okay, am I just gonna put another zero at the end of this? Am I just gonna like get a little better in this? And it just seemed in this moment like so marginal and so irrelevant, and it shocked me to my core. And I had just gotten married. I got married at 29, 2 months before my 30th birthday. And also at this time, I had experienced about a year of back to back to back, increasingly more severe injuries. Started with like, oh, I like sprained my wrist, and then like broke a toe, and then it tore my shoulder, and all of these things like throughout this year leading up to 30 started hitting me. And so there was the weight of the what is this life all about? But then there was this also a weight of like my finite nature of life. I mean, I'm going through a few things, but at this time, my father also started to have some health issues, and he had to retire from his career as an airline pilot. And he was going to retire in the next few years, but he retired a little bit earlier because he started to have some health issues and he was hospitalized around this time. And so all of this weight around his mortality, my body starting to break down was all hitting me right around this same time. And the biggest injury was I broke my leg about 6 weeks before I got married. I was on a walking crutch during my whole wedding. And looking back, the signals were so strong, but I was so head down in what I was doing that I didn't see them. I couldn't see them. And they were hitting me right in the face. They were slapping me in the face, and I wasn't listening. I often use the metaphor around these like universal signs as the feather, the brick, and the Mack truck. And it's like they come to you first, like really subtly and really gently, and kind of just brushing through your hair, and you don't even notice them. And then like it's like a brick getting thrown at you, and it bruises and it hurts and it swells, and it's like, wow, I really need to pay attention to that. I really need to take care of this. I really need to do something different. But back then, again, the hard-headedness, the stubbornness, the head down, I just kept going. And then the inevitable Mack truck hit me a few months later. I came back and from my honeymoon, and I was training for the CrossFit games, and this was the year that I was the most fit I'd ever been, despite all these injuries, and I was training so hard, and I really had a thought that I could go far. And at the first workout of this like CrossFit Open, my body said no. Basically, a combination of just the high stress environment. My musculature was so tight because I was holding so much tension throughout my whole life. I was so stressed. It was constricting the vagus nerve to the brain, and so it wasn't signaling properly. And so in that case, the brain thought it wasn't getting enough blood, and it actually was. And this was in peak like exercise, maximal heart rate. And the combination of all those things with also I had a barbell over my head. So I was in this weird like neck cramped position.
Perfect stance.
Perfect storm, perfect soup of like, here you go. And I just remember like I could feel my heartbeat like blasting in my head. And I've been to like really dark places in workouts, like where you just like really going for it. In fact, I would call that my like one of my first initiations was learning how to push myself hard so physically. But in this case, I wasn't listening to the signs that was saying like, okay, enough is enough. And I just kept going. And it was like the very end of this workout, I think just like 30 seconds left. And it just increased. And then a grenade went off in my head. The lights went out and I passed out. And you know, I came to, I don't know, moments later. And I just remember blurry vision, loud music, and I had goosebumps. For the first moment in my life, in this first moment in my life, I was actually afraid for my life. I didn't know what happened. I was no longer in control, or I thought I was in control, and I was scared. Like my whole body was scared. And you know, that was enough to wake me up to the reality that I couldn't keep pushing the way that I was, pushing physically, pushing mentally. I was just carrying so much, and I was holding it so tightly, both in work and also in my physical.
What were you ignoring at that time that, you know, I would say you were awakened to?
Yeah, at the time, be generous, my awareness wasn't as broad and wide as it is now. It was it was more like physical. It was the combination of those injuries and just like everything starting to break down. And it was this realization of just, I cannot keep pushing myself like this. And for the first time, I had to question why I was even doing all this, why I was building these businesses, why I was pushing myself hard, doing Ironman and CrossFit at the same time, always trying to prove myself. And and it didn't come in instantly. It was a lot of fear for the first part. And this was a long healing journey. And I was, um, I liken it to the analogy that I use is my life at that time for months and months felt like I had I had one foot on two different like paddle boards, stand-up paddle boards, and they were slowly drifting in different directions. And on any given day, one day I wanted to jump back and like be all in on who I used to be. My entire ego was wrapped up in being this successful entrepreneur, this athlete, so fit and having it all together. And in this other side was just this like really deep pain. And I was like, I can't do it anymore. And everything in me wanted to break down, but I didn't have the tools and I didn't have the support that I was aware of at the time to really go into that pain. And so, for a long period of time, I really just uh, sat in a lot of stillness and silence. That period of time was very dark for me. These many months where I was just going on long walks in the woods because I couldn't work the way that I used to. I was working 14, 16, 18 hours a day as much as I could, and I couldn't work out anymore. Um, because just raising my heart rate above resting would bring this sensation back on, and it would just, this like 10 out of 10 headache, it would just spiderweb around, and it was so painful. And so I just took a lot of walks, and I just sat alone for the first time in my life. All the darkness, all the pain started flooding in when I was spending all this time to myself. And it brings me sadness because I probably had people in my life that would have been there for me. I just didn't know how to ask. I didn't know how to open up to that. I had never touched feelings, and definitely not feelings as deep as I was feeling them. And, I didn't even feel safe to bring it to my wife at the time. And it must have been so difficult for her because I was so depressed, and I was so hard on myself, and I was trying to pretend like I was still the same man, but everything inside was saying something different. And so there was just this inner conflict and tension, and I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know how to bring it. And so every time someone asked like, "Oh, how you doing? Like, how you recovering? How's everything?" Just good. Yeah, doing good. The standard guy answer, right? And that's all I had. And yet it wasn't good. And yeah, I look back on that version of myself with so much compassion and understanding, because he just didn't know. He wasn't taught this. He wasn't modeled this. And I thought it was such a weakness to embrace this. So I was trying to stuff it down the same way that I'd stuffed everything else down my whole life up until that point. And it was just too much. And so, oh God bless her, my ex-wife, she's the one that really got me into this work. As ironically, a lot of men that I work with, their women are ones that kind of like encourage it and push it. So really grateful for her in this, because she was going through her own transition process where she was questioning things, and in a completely different way than me. But she signed up for a program that was all about like inner child healing and emotional healing and release. And I had the opportunity to join that same online cohort, and it was still like, it was right there in front of me, and I was like, no, I'm good. I think I had recovered like physically, and I was like back to working out, even though I had um I had told myself like I'm not going there again. I'm not going back. So my perspective started to shift towards health and longevity, and I was treating myself so much better. I'd gone through like a really serious healing process, working with massage and chiropractic and acupuncture, and this was again around the same time part of my initiation because I didn't believe in any of that stuff. I was like full blown raised just like, yep, Western medicine, you go to the doctor, they do the thing, surgery, pills, do the thing. But when I went that route with this thing, no one could give me any
Mm.
answers. No one could really help me.
If I could
And
just
the
jump in
only,
here, Chris.
yeah,
I would like to just speak into this sense of, I mentioned this as well before we started rolling, the sense of disillusionment of who you knew yourself to be, right? And it's almost like we can see it as a certain death of an aspect of
yeah,
yourself, a death of
yes.
who you used to be and the ways of
Mm-hmm.
operating. And as much as you wanted to go or continue on that route, everything in your life was telling you there is no way back,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
you were also sharing the fact that you didn't have the tools, the skills, the knowledge, nor the understandings that would support you on this new way of being. You were referring
Mm-hmm.
to, you know, expressing emotions, asking for help as a perceived sense of weakness, which is such a common conditioning for so many of us as men, right? And I see that
Yeah.
these were all the things that you were up against. And I think I just want to bring this in because I believe so many men can relate to that. Well, your experience is so unique to you. I believe these themes are the ones men can relate to. That it's like a new path forward is being asked of them. They don't have the fucking skills. And then they're up against the conditioning of who they think they should be or how things they should be and what makes them valuable as a man. And now there's a huge crumbling around all that. So could you speak a little bit to what had supported you on now finding this new path of, going to therapy, of,
Mm-hmm.
exploring healing modalities, of leaning into a new edge? Like, was it just allowing yourself to be humbled as fuck? Or is it like, what is it?
Dude, you just nailed it on that last piece. It was the first time in my life I really felt humbled as fuck. And I felt weak. I felt helpless. And in that I resisted so much all of those things, all of those qualities was this gift of surrender. And I wouldn't have called it back then, but in a way, like I was giving up on life. And so there was a lot of darkness there for me, is like, am I actually giving up on life? And and but with that, like you said, like this whole massive part of me, this whole facade that I had built was crumbling and dying. And I was, a part of me, like on any given day, was trying to hold so tightly and bring it back because it was the only thing I knew to be secure and safe. And but it was dying anyway. It was like sand through my hands, and I couldn't do anything about it. And so that couldn't do anything about it part led to just this deep, like, again, at the time I wasn't spiritual. I wouldn't have called myself connected to God at all. Probably would have called myself more of an atheist. But it was almost like this throwing my hands up to like, man, I don't know anymore. In fact, I recall that's exactly how it occurred to me. It was like, I don't know anymore. I grew up, every moment that something was asked of me, I conditioned myself to like know and like be in control and know the answer, have the answer, or figure it out. And at this time was the first time I started admitting, is like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what's next. Like, I don't know what I want. Like, I don't know if I want to be here, do this thing. Like, I was just, um, yeah, I was just like leaning back, and I was just like, I don't know, hands up, surrender, white flag. And in that, with all that humility, people started to show up. And for the first time, because I had that hands up moment where I was like, I need help because I don't know, people were there to help me.
Mm.
Before, I don't need help. And so even if they showed up, I wouldn't have even been able to see
There
them.
wasn't a capacity to receive, even if it was already
It,
there.
yes, because I was so closed to knowing that I had it all together. I was so committed to this story that I was in complete control of my life and I had it all together and I was the good boy and I was doing all the good things. And anything less than that what occurred to me as failure at the time. And so I was like, nope, no help. I'm good. I'm strong. I'll do it all on my own. And then with all of this humbling, so many people showed up and so many people cared. And for the first time, I let people help me. I let people see me in pain and weakness. I remember, man, two individuals in particular, an acupuncturist and a massage therapist. And I also had a dear friend who's a chiropractor who also helped me. But with the massage therapist and the acupuncturist, they were both women and they were both a little bit older, like a few decades older than me. And they had this like really kind, loving energy. And I remember on both occasions being on their tables and just crying and weeping as I'm getting massages and acupuncture. And I had, at this point in my adult life, maybe cried like one or two times. I'm thinking my grandfather's funeral and my grandmother's funeral. Because and that was it. And even that, was probably younger than teenage years. But so this was so new to me, but it felt so good. It felt so good to be held and then to not be judged by them, but in fact, the opposite. Like in me opening up, I felt this overwhelming amount of love and care and support and help. And like, it's okay. Like, just this, it's okay. Yeah, like that's okay. And I had never experienced that before. And, yeah, and then I just had this continue to go down this surrender path of like, okay, continue showing me, like continue sending me people to help. And I had a coach show up and it was this one that I was talking about earlier with my ex-wife. And she had done her program and she was finishing it. And, you know, for the first time I was like, I'm kind of jealous of like what my wife is doing. And I want some of it because she was so happy and she was lighter. Um, and so I ended up joining that program, the next cohort. And, you know, it was like the same experience as she was a little older and had a loving motherly energy for me at the time. And, um, I was able to go into some things. It was very structured to go through like mother and father learning, and I was able to go into some things that I wasn't even aware of, had never touched before. Really about just like the ways that I saw myself and I saw the world and I saw how I was acting and yeah, it was very impactful. And then that opened up another door to another mentor. And then that opened up a door to some plant medicine experiences that were also deeply impactful for me. And those doors kept opening when I kept welcoming them. And over this period of time, it was just like a very subtle and gentle opening. And every time I got support and I was able to be seen in that and heal a little bit, I would open a little more and more people would show up. And I have so much gratitude for every one of those people along the way from like start to finish of that journey, because they all played like such a key part in me continuing to open, and even to this day continuing to open.
I believe one of the most difficult things for so many of us can be to continue sitting in the discomfort of what is occurring and just that death process essentially, and the grieving that needs to happen, particularly when we have disconnected from ourselves for a very long time. essentially this process is what's required in order to come back and return to a sense of aliveness again. And I think it can be one of the most difficult things, to be with what is in such moments, because to your point, it is such a loss of control. And I don't know what it
Mm-hmm.
is about us as men and within the masculine psyche. There is this deep desire for control and
Mm-hmm.
agency, and like having that understanding that we can be the leaders of our lives and steer our lives. But I think when we're leaning too far into that, it's all up to me and I'm the one who's steering this whole ship. I think this is when we actually get humbled very deeply.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious to hear, for any man who might go through this experience, what would you say about like sitting and seeping in that discomfort and not backing out? Because I think this is what happens, right? Essentially, this process is initiating us, but I think some people leave too early and are essentially almost half baked, half cooked.
Yes.
So yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if you have some thoughts to share on that.
Yeah, man, that's such like a great awareness around the process. And so many teachers that I've sat with and been trained with talk about this, is that you never want to interrupt the process that's unfolding for you, because you if you eject too early, you're kind of in this purgatory realm, this half-baked nature, as you said. And so the uh the initiatory process is one that will either happen by choice, like consent, like you're leaning into it, or it will happen through life's events that happen to us. And a lot of men experience initiations unconsciously, or without without the consent and leaning in, through relationship, through having a child, through the death of a loved one, through like a really hard financial hardship, bankruptcy, or something that's really devastating. And these type of like major life changes oftentimes lead to these big initiatory experiences where a part of them is dying. And just like just like in the biological process, when something is dying, you can't halt it, you can't stop it, and there's nothing you can really do about it but to accept that process. And so with us, in the parts of our psyches that are dying, is can we find ways to this is the one that really helped me. I'll actually share this first. A coach said this to me. They said that if you can start saying thank you for the hardest challenges in your life right now, even when they're in the darkest, in the hardest, it will give an opportunity for the gift of this initiation or the gift of this challenge to appear
Hmm.
later. But if you continue to resist it, aka not thank you, in fact the opposite, like don't want you here, if you have that energy, you will continue to drag it along. You will drag the weight along, and you will never ever see the gift of going through the full initiatory process and up leveling to the next version of yourself. And so saying thank you to the hardest challenges in my life, and I started doing this at this time, and then I did it again later when I had another initiation, when separated and divorced from the wife that I was talking about. And I started saying thank you for it, like almost initially. And I reached out to that coach, and they're just like, "Can you say thank you, even if you don't understand it, even if you don't get it? Can you say thank you for whatever is happening here, whatever messiness, whatever chaos? Because someday you will look back on this and and you will say thank you, and you will say, wow, I couldn't have been here in this life of my dreams had I not gone through that. I could not be the man I am today had I not gone through that challenging initiatory process." And the saying thank you in the hardest moments is the way where we say yes to the initiation. Like in a lot of traditional initiatory process in traditional cultures where they still hold initiations for young men, um, they occur to them, they happen for them when they are ready for them. The boy doesn't always believe he's ready for it, but it happens when the community decides that the boy is ready. They thrust him into it. And so it is an initiation because in that process, he figures out within himself through a lot of challenges that he is ready. He was ready, he is ready, and now he can step into another level of what it means to be a man by choosing to face the challenges, by choosing to go into them, no matter how hard, no matter how devastating, no matter how painful. And that process, that initiatory process has largely been lost, not only just in tradition and in action, but in our psychology. There's no demarcation of you move from this stage to this stage. You are now this. There's no, it's just this aging process physically, biologically, but oftentimes grown men are still living in boy psychology because they didn't go through this clear demarcation. And I believe we do have multiple initiatory processes, but for every man, there is always a very clear, at least one, where there's a demarcation between, wow, I was operating from boy, and now I'm choosing to operate from man.
I think what's really missing here, Chris, is the absence of story, the absence of mythology, the absence of ritual, and how this wisdom was being passed down from generation to generation through these stories. And this is something I've been constantly reflecting on, which is why I actually love sharing about this process of initiation, because I believe so many men are not aware of this process of initiation and the arc that essentially we go through. So many of us, when we go through the heartbreak, when we go through the financial crisis, when we experience that death, it's almost like we get wrapped up in our own bubble around, this is my experience, no one can understand this, I'm all alone in this, and I'm not seeking to dismiss the gravity of that experience, but what I also want to just acknowledge is that these initiatory events are experiences that we'll all go through. And I personally believe they are here to allow us to mature, to evolve, to grow, to deepen into our understanding of who we really are, but also why we're really here. Like, this is really what these experiences, I believe, are here for. And just to maybe bring my own experiences in, just to give another lens for our listeners, I as well have gone through a number of these initiations. And what I'd shared with you as well before we started recording is that it seems to me that there's another layer of this initiation that's moving through me, where I'm noticing that there is still aspects of, using your terms, within my boy psychology, the protective mechanisms that I learned from very early on, because essentially, there was moments where I didn't feel safe, and I was like, okay, my nervous system takes a snapshot of those experiences and perceives, what am I going to do from now on moving forward to ensure that I will stay safe, right? For me, it was becoming high and overachieving. For me, it was ensuring that I can stay in control of whatever is here. I need to do everything perfect, and as well ensure that I'm never in a position, never in a state of vulnerability. I show up rather aloof in relationships because that keeps me rather safe and no one can touch me. If I'm showing up as this distant, more mysterious type of guy. Like these are all certain layers that were presenting itself. And while they may have served me for a while, and so I think it is valuable and important to say thank you for those moments that they have served us. But then we also have to reflect on, where are they not serving us any longer to where we're going? And so this is something as well that I was reflecting on in terms of this podcast and the work that I do, that I'm not doing this to receive a sense of admiration, status, affection, love, sense of safety. Don't get me wrong, there are certain aspects that want all those things. And I think those are inherent needs that are beautiful. And I think what was really missing is just this recognition of where all of this is coming from. And essentially, it's this recognition that I was being moved by the pain that I experienced, and as well the growth that came as a result of the pain that I experienced, right? And essentially the compassion that I felt for myself, but also other people who are struggling. I think that is what's moving me on a lot deeper level. And so that means I need to carry these aspects while not allowing them to dictate where I'm moving forwards. So I know I've said a lot here, so I'm curious if there's anything that comes up in terms of what I said.
Beautiful. Yeah. Many things come up in that. And actually it was something, pieces of it are coming back to your initial question and prompt that like want to come through right now, that the whole aspect of this boy nature, this boy psychology that we're talking about is so useful when we're a boy, because we don't yet have the capacity, the capability, the strength to be on our own. And so one of the fundamental principles of this boy psychology is they look outward to external things for attention, survival, for love. They're always looking for something to fill that bucket. And of course, when we're young, that's mother primarily. And oftentimes for a lot of men, there's a lot of wounding there around how their mother showed up for them, how it was received, the way that she loved or didn't love and give attention. And so the transition that's fundamental when we mature into man psychology is that shifts from this like external blaming and looking to others for this, like, oh, they did that, and oh, woe me, and this is happening to me, and I need it. That whole boy nature, we transition into looking within. And a male who's operating in man psychology is looking within for that guidance system, for that direction. And going back to what we were talking about on leadership, I'll be even clearer about looking within. The word I use for it is looking to God. And you can use a lot of different words for that, but that one I've been reclaiming over the last many years is my relationship to God and the divine, and allowing that channel to be the thing that leads me, not the ego, not the material shells that I put around myself and the facades, but actually something much, much deeper. And that's what the initiatory process brings out. A key component of the initiatory process is community. It is the women and the men have different roles in the initiation of men. And there is always a time where the man has to look within. He doesn't have the crutches of the community, and he doesn't have the I'll help you through this hard time. It's like, you got to get through it yourself, and you have to find the place in you, which I believe is much, much deeper than this human or this egoic facade that we put up to other people. It's much deeper than that. And that's when the switch happens, when we're forced Like oftentimes because our life is on the line in some, there's physical danger, we're forced to find a deeper connection to source, to God, and to learn that that channel is always open. And real leadership, I would not have said this even just a couple of years ago, but I believe real leadership is I used to think of it as just a very masculine quality of like initiation and like initiating action and movement forward. And now I'm realizing there is an equal part of the feminine within us that is receiving the God signal, that's receiving the message, that is the actual compass. And so if we don't have that feminine receiving happening, all the action and all the initiating movement forward is all coming from the egoic place. And so we have to have both of those, ironically, union, the union of both of those within ourselves to be able to receive that God's will and then act it upon the world. And without both of those, I don't think we have true leadership.
I love what you're saying. And it seems as well, like when I reflect as well on initiatory events and what they're here for, I believe one of the essential elements to initiations is to be humbled to something greater than ourselves, and essentially having a capacity to surrender to that. And I believe there is many words for that. You know, we could use God, we could use this divine essence, we could use life. It doesn't have to be as well this more liminal, mysterious, or mystical thing. It can also be, you know, something higher, such as our family, or something that's bigger than ourselves fundamentally, where we're willing to sacrifice our own egoic desires or needs. Not saying that those aren't of value and that we're supposed to completely abandon ourselves, because I think that's also something that a lot of men find themselves in. But I think there is this essential element of there's this fundamental sacrificial nature within us,
Mm-hmm.
and that capacity to actually listen. So I'm curious, for any man who might not fully grasp this language
Mm-hmm.
that you're using
Mm-hmm.
around, you
Mm-hmm.
know, being able to listen to that feminine from within, being able to listen to that sense of um, divine essence moving through us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to hear, what are some signs that a man could um, connect to or point towards that will show him, oh, okay, this is the thing. I'd be curious to hear what you have to say to that.
Yeah, great question. I'll I'll say that the first step in that conversation channel being opened is a man has to first get comfortable in stillness and silence. They have to train like vigorously nothingness. Like they have to sit in nothingness and first to become aware. Then this helps to train the mind and to show you how distracted you really are. And so before you can even start to like receive that, like you really have to start bringing quietness to your life. You have to cut out the distractions and the excess noise and just all the things that are pulling you far away from that connection. And we could name hundreds of things probably off the top of our head of like the way men get distracted. And frankly, like our culture is built to pull men away from that place, because men that are connected to that place are unbreakable, unstoppable. They will die on the hill of that. But men that aren't connected to that place and they are distracted, they are weak, and they are able to be manipulated. And so all of our culture is set up to distract men. So we have a stack, like we have what's the term for it? Like a stacked hand against us, basically. Like, we're playing a tough game here. But that's the point. That's the point. And I think that is why a lot more men are coming to this work now, is because the force back against this part of ourselves is getting stronger and louder. The distractions are getting more. And so I think that is actually a process of the collective awakening happening. Is there has to be more noise to wake more people up and to help them come back to that place. But if you're finding yourself and you're sitting there and you're like, wow, that's me. Like, I feel distracted. Like, I go from one thing to the next, and work's a distraction, phone's a distraction, and like everything is just this perpetual sucking of your energy. Then the first step is to start eliminating and start cutting. There are plenty of ways that I actually do this in my work, and in the men's work that I do, is we do things like cell phone detoxes, like the dopamine detox. We do things like a feminine cleanse is what we call it. I got that from one of my teachers, John Wineland. And
What is that? Just so people have a bit of an understanding
oh
of it.
yeah. So a feminine cleanse is, for a period of time, you do not engage in feminine energy distraction. And without going too deep into like the yoga of it, like the feminine is like all things, basically. All the things in our life is the feminine. But in this case, oftentimes what we're referring to is feminine energy from women. And so that oftentimes means you're not dating, you're not having sex with women, you're not even like looking at them in the gym. The gym is a tough one, like here in Austin, Texas, and like everyone's dressed to the nines, and so you're just trained to like, nope, just right here. And you're not getting your energy pulled. And of course, it's a difficult task because there's so much of that. No porn, no pulling the feminine energy from like Instagram or whatever it is. And so you do this feminine cleanse really to see all of the ways you're actually addicted to filling yourself with it. That's the point, is for it to become crystal clear, like, oh wow, that was a really subtle. Some are subtle, some are not so subtle, but there's so many that come up, and there's layers to it. So as an example, I did a feminine cleanse, and this was coming off of a divorce in my life. I was with that woman for 10 years, and I divorced. It was shocking. That was like the last straw of my ego that was holding up, was like my role as a husband, and that collapsed. And then I was single for a time, and kind of had a wild period. Honestly, I kind of like needed to go out and explore women because I felt like I was missing that in my life. And then I was like, that actually isn't it. Like, the way I'm doing this doesn't feel good. I'm literally seeking to get filled by all of this feminine energy, and there's women everywhere. And so I said no, feminine cleanse, I need to do it. And I did it for 3 months at first. And I remember getting to the end of the 3 months, and I still had these ways where I was like, and they were getting more and more subtle, but I was like, oh, I'm definitely not done. So I ended up doing it it ended up being 7 months. And almost immediately after doing that is when I met my current wife, my queen, the love of my life, like the woman for me. I met her on the tail of doing that, because in a way, to be ready for a woman like that, my wife, I had to not be the type of man that was going to get distracted and pulled off of all of these little ways that I was at the time. And so I had to go through like a cleansing process like that. So highly recommend for most men, honestly. Because whether we know it or not, there's a lot of ways that our energy is getting pulled, our sexual energy, our attention, and our awareness. And
Yeah, I can definitely second that. I just want to say as well, I've had my own experiences with doing a feminine cleanse, and it was humbling, to come
Mm.
back to that word, just to recognize the ways that I was constantly seeking to be filled and get certain hits,
Hmm.
through the exposure of the feminine, and in
Yeah.
all kinds of different ways. And for me to actually sit with the loneliness that was there, but beyond
Hmm.
just the, little hits that I was seeking for, like what were the qualities, what were the expressions that I was actually looking for? And I think for me, it
Yeah.
was really the feminine qualities that essentially that I wasn't able or I didn't know how to provide to myself. Nurturance, care,
Mm-hmm.
compassion,
Hmm.
love,
Hmm.
all of those things. I think just a welcoming of all the various different aspects of myself. And I think because there was such a denial and dismissal of that, that there's a constant need to look out, right? Because I feel empty within.
Hmm.
And hearing as well the experiences from so many men, I could see as well that this is the case for so many. So I'm definitely hearing the importance of being able to cut ourselves off from all the ways that we are distracting ourselves to actually um, be able to listen to that channel that you were referring to.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It's a really beautiful process. And another way to put it is like, live simply. Live simple in your mind, live simple in your life, and just cut out all of the noise. And if you're arguing that it's something you're arguing to yourself, oh, that's something I don't need to cut out, that's exactly what you need to cut out. Speaking from experience, I do that inner
Yeah.
negotiation, as many of us do. And so from that place of simple living, you um you get to start to experience deeper moments because there's more space, there's more time, and so you're more present. And in that presence, you are able to start connecting to this deeper truth that we're referring to, this higher truth, this source. And this is like the monk path, right? And we don't have to go full monk, and we don't have to devote our entire existence to that, but we can understand that a part of that is really necessary, especially at this time in a man's life when they find themselves living a life that's not theirs. They're getting pulled in every which direction, and none of it is their actual choice. And that is a hard and humbling thing to even admit in the first place. And I remember how hard of a time I had with that. I was like, no, 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 I want to do this. I want to, but then it was like, oh no, but actually that's just a want of my father, or that's just a want of like, yeah, this being a good boy for my mother. Um, and so having that courage to realize that, again, like me, like maybe I don't have all the answers, maybe I don't have it all together, and in that process, um, being humbled, and then going into the stillness, going into the simplicity, and allowing yourself to be uncomfortable there. I think that is really what we're avoiding in ourselves when we go to all these external things, is just being uncomfortable in ourself. And I started finding breath work and meditation on my journey, went through vipassanas, and which is like a 10-day silent meditation retreat. Love it, recommend it again to every man. um, it's a it's a beautiful process when, at least it was for me, I'll speak to my own experience, when I realized that I didn't need anything, and that I was completely whole, and I was, call it happy, like really happy, and I was whole just as me, when I was connected to this like deeper consciousness, there was no need. I had no need. And that is that is the deepest nourishment for men that are feeling kind of on the other end of that spectrum, is to start connecting to that part of themselves, that deeper consciousness that has no need, that is infinite, that and there's a lot of ways to get there. There's a lot of modalities that help men get there, and I encourage all men to explore them. I mean, you can find this through yoga, through martial arts, through breath, through meditation, through embodiment work. Like, there's so many paths to get to the same thing, and it's a worthy pursuit, man. It really is.
If I could just jump in here, Chris,
Yeah.
I just want to as well, bring my own perspective to this, because, I would say I absolutely agree with everything that you're saying. And I just want as well to acknowledge how grateful that I am, that I found meditation for myself roughly 8 years ago at the backdrop of a relationship ending, and just really not being able to actually sort out the thoughts that were going on and the emotions that were present. And I just recall how, not initially, but after a few weeks, I started noticing that there was a certain awareness that I was cultivating. I had this capacity to notice what was happening, but I was able to as well distance myself from the experience, from the thoughts, from the emotions. And the more I was able to get access to that, I'm going to say witnesser, or that capacity to be aware of my experience, the more I was able to cultivate that experience within me, the more I was as well able and to access that, channel that you're referring to, that aspect of listening to that deeper essence, that deeper being of what is essentially guiding me. And I'm just so grateful that as I was pursuing this path, I continued to cultivate that for myself through various different modalities, through yoga, what you referred to, through breath work, through qigong. And I think this is as well why that I'm such a strong proponent to all these aspects, because I think they're really fundamental to all the distractions that we have, to all the noise that we have. And I think it is incredibly difficult if we don't have such practices that allow us to cut the noise so we can essentially connect with ourselves. I'm curious to hear from you, Chris, if people are listening and, they love what you're saying, but there might still be this internal conflict, which might say, Chris, I love all of this and I hear you and I agree with all of this, but I got all these responsibilities. I have literally no time to my hands. I have a family to provide for. I have a job that I perceive myself feeling stuck in. I don't know where to go. I don't know how to do this. I don't have time to my hands. How can I actually go on this path right now? I'm curious to hear what you
Yeah.
have to say to those individuals.
Yeah, it's such a great question, and I've realized over the years that um, I don't think men can really be convinced to go on this path, like with a mental argument of like, because I heard that argument for many years before I got into this world, and I was like, that's weird stuff, and it's why do I need to do that? I've got all this stuff going on, and I don't have time for that and everything. So I lived like all of those answers. Honestly, I lived it, and I think the answer actually why men end up going on this path is because they have an experience. And so the invitation that I would make to any man listening is like, don't believe me, don't believe Alex, like, but go try something that seems a little strange, seems a little out there, seems a little weird. That's how I would have described it back then. And have an experience. Like, go even just to a meditation class or a yoga class or a qigong class, and really just trust whatever calls you, essentially. Trust, like if something pops up in your, this is how it used to happen to me when I realized it. Something would pop in my awareness like 3, 4 times, like in a week. And I'm like, why am I seeing this same sign as I drive? And it's, oh, it's a yoga place. Oh, weird. That's like, so when we quiet down, this is the other thing. When we quiet down, we start seeing those signs, those signals, and they'll start showing more clearly. And you're like, oh, that's weird. I don't know why this is showing up in my awareness, but it clearly is. Like you were saying, your awareness deepens, strengthens, and you start noticing these things. And you're like, huh, okay, go do it. Follow the breadcrumb and just see. This is what I needed to hear, honestly, because nobody could convince me of what I believed in my own mind at the time. And so I understand that very deeply. But the experience of even just 10% more awareness, or just the experience of 10% more relaxation in my body, the experience of like, oh, wow, I didn't know this was possible, whatever this is. And it was enough of a shift from my everyday waking life, because we just start to normalize things. I was at the point where I was just normalizing waking up with pain at 29 years old. It was just like, yeah, I'm just in pain. We normalize things all the time. And so when you have an experience that kind of like catapults you far from your normal state, it's much harder to ignore than with someone just like explains it to you. So, man, I obviously work in this realm. I run retreats. I would love to have any listener at any of our retreats or events, but it doesn't have to be us. One of the great things about the time that we're living in now is these things are no longer fringe, and they may still be fringe in some places where some men are listening, and you may have to seek them out. But the good news is also, you can start accessing some of the greatest teachers online. You can do a free workshop with, like, I don't know, I just did one with Montauk Chia the other day. He's like, you do a free workshop with him. You can do a free workshop with literally any teacher out there, the best breathwork instructors, the best yoga instructors. You can do it oftentimes for free. And the invitation would be to just try and experience it and give it a chance. Give yourself a chance. I think if a man is listening to this show, Alex, they're already a little bit open to some things outside of the norm. And I think what we call the norm is actually shifting. At least in my world it is, and for the men that I work with, like their worlds is shifting. I think it's starting to shift where men are having deeper conversations with each other. They're having deeper experiences. They're committing to a path that's greater than themselves. And man, like I was saying before, press record, like I am so optimistic of like just the commitment of the men that I see every single day, like doing this work. And so it's out there. Go have a felt experience. There's so many amazing teachers. I was so skeptical. And so I tried a lot of things in my journey. Like you, I mean, I tried all, like literally the smorgasbord, the charcuterie plate of spirituality. And I was very discerning and I was slow to trust. And so I just kind of dipped my toes in a lot of things and I got gifts from a lot of it.
Yep.
And so allow yourself to do that.
I love that. And I reflect as well back on a time roughly 6-7 years ago where I had my first truly humbling moment. And it was in that time where I allowed myself to embrace that I don't know shit or I don't know much. And so I'm like, all right, let's just be a student right now and let me just learn a lot. Right. And it brought me as well down my first Vipassana. And after a yoga class, I was like, all right, let me just immerse in this and become a yoga teacher. Right. Let me just do this for an entire month. Right. Yeah. I went to a breathwork class 4 years ago and then found my teacher. And I was like, shit, like I really want to immerse myself in this. And then I went through a 3-month practitioner training with them. Right. I found Tantra for myself. I found Qigong. And so it is through these experiences essentially. And I would say as well, immersive experiences
Mm-hmm.
where there is a felt sense that we can come from that is so much deeper than our mind and our cognitive and intellectual functions. And I think we need to experience that deeper felt sense to actually
Mm-hmm.
um, bypass these explanations or these excuses
Mm-hmm.
or these understandings of the mind. So, Chris, we're already almost 70 minutes in, and I've loved this conversation so far. And to close it off, I would love to ask you a few more questions. And if there's one thing I would just love to reflect back to you is that hearing your story, it's almost hard to believe where you came from because I perceive the sense of ease in you, right? You spoke to this optimistic nature, and I almost feel like there is a sense of gracefulness, if that's even a word, the way that you're moving through life. Of course, we don't know each other that well, but at least that's what I perceive in you. And I wonder, for any man who, you know, might still perceive that life and work needs to be struggle and we need to force ourselves through, what would you say to that man in terms of accessing a little bit more grace, a little bit more ease, a little bit more optimism?
Oh, first off, thank you for sharing that, man. And I was smiling because yesterday I wrote an email to my list that's going out tomorrow that I had that exact line. I said, like, if I didn't walk every step of my journey, like, I wouldn't believe it. And the title of the email was like a tale of two lives, because that's really what it felt like for me. And there's man, there's so many answers I would go with for this. The one that came to me, I think, is really critically important, that I really believe in my work, is to um, start move towards mastering your breath. When I mean that, what I mean when I say that is um, becoming more conscious of your breath, learning how to, I'll just call it, use your breath, because I, be, I believe it this to be true, that our breath is the switch for this thing we call our nervous system. It's the deciding factor whether we are living wound up, anxious, tense, stressed, overwhelmed. Use whatever word you want, but um, it decides whether we're living that way or if we're living the way of relaxed ease, grace, peace. And, I don't think I have to convince any listeners, but the latter is way better. Living in peace and ease is way, way better. It's better for every aspect of our life. Um, and the access point is with simply just becoming conscious of our breath, learning how to gently deepen our breath, learning how to breathe into our belly. And there may be some work that's needed on the physiology, like on your actual body along the way as well. And so I'm a firm believer. I wrote a whole piece on this about how when we grow, develop, heal, it's important to do it across a few different planes or spectrums. Because if we don't, then we may make some progress, but oftentimes we'll kind of like rubber band effect back. Like if we work on our body, for instance, I'll use a simple example, but we don't work on our mind and the reasons why we're cruel to our body and we do things to our body, then you will likely rubber band back into the same patterns. And the same thing happens with like our spiritual practices and our physicality and our mental state and our emotional and our energetic. Like when we're working with these all together simultaneously, we can have a much more lasting effect, which is why I'm such a huge fan of practices. We named a lot of them. The inner martial arts is one of my favorite. for men in general, for men, any men, but there's specific ones that I've worked with, qigong, like you mentioned, and now I'm training in a Russian martial art called Sistema, and I'm absolutely hooked and addicted. And
Never
if it
heard of it.
wasn't so, uh, dude, I'll go into it. It's amazing. It's um, but let me wrap this point on. Then I want to get back to Sistema because I'm addicted in the best way. Not really addicted, but I just like I'm pulled towards it because of the access point that it gives me and the relaxation in my body. But martial arts, the inward ones especially, but also practices the same thing like yoga and tantric practices and things that are embodied experiences because you're working with the body, you're working with the breath, you're working with the awareness, and the things that combine all of those and teachers that are skilled in bringing your awareness to those things will have the most impact, the most lasting impact. And yeah, that's it's why I think like I had such a tough time with just starting meditation at first is because I wasn't working in any realms. It was just this mental exercise, and it was useful, and it opened the door for other things and for me to deepen in meditation. But what I realized is when I started working across all of them, and my body relaxed and my mind relaxed and just everything in my nature was more relaxed, my meditations were instantly deeper. So that goes across, you could draw that parallel to any one of these realms that we're talking about, but really recommend working in the body, working on the body. Okay, I'm back to Sistema.
If I could just
I'll
jump in
do this
here,
one.
just to
Yeah, yeah.
add one point, because I think it's just so important and it's just so valuable. I think there is something to say and to add here around the importance of exploring breadth and
Mm-hmm.
experiencing and going wide, and just
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that there is a lot of various different disciplines that are different
Mm-hmm.
access points that essentially support you in creating this very coherent, very integrated system. And I think there is something to say about developing a sense of range within our experience as men. If I may just comment on your experiences, in your 30s or late 20s, it seems like one of the difficulties that arose from you is because you just had this one mode of being and you didn't have access to anything else, right? And I think this is
No
as well one
range.
of the
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
difficulties that occurs for so many men and has also been my experience that I didn't have a range in my capacity of how I operate. I didn't have a sense of flexibility or couldn't be adaptive because I simply didn't know how. And I think there is this
Mm-hmm.
importance around exploring various different ways of being and exploring the sense of range. And as you might know, or I think I mentioned this to you, I'm as well going through John's leadership training at the moment, and as well there we're exploring just various different textures of maleness or manhood, from lighter textures to darker textures. And I think there is an importance for us as men to be embodied or have at least access to all those spectrums to as well feel and listen and know what the moment is asking for and having it essentially a capacity to actually access that. So I felt it was important just to add
Yeah.
that in here.
Yes, thank you for adding that. I was starting to go down breath and I realized I sidetracked myself because you're absolutely right, Alex. There is no coincidence that breath is a fundamental aspect of every single ancient traditional practice or spiritual path. It's a part of it. It's a key component of it, and it has the ability to. And I shouldn't use absolutes. I don't know that to be certain, but I know that largely it is a part of most, and it is an ability in an instant, in a moment, to change and shift our state. And when we learn how to shift our state, we're starting to explore, like you said, the entire range, the entire spectrum of human experience. And um, I similar to you, man. I explored so many different breath modalities, and I similar, like I was so pulled and called to it. Actually, my first introduction, it's silly because it happened back when I was training Ironman, was when I had a running coach teach me how to breathe, and it was the first time I had awareness on my breath. Like that was an access point, but that was even years before I had all these injuries and all this key moment that we were talking about. And so even back then, it was like starting to seed itself. And so there's a lot of doors to get to the same thing. But you're right, man. This range is what makes us feel alive and also responsive to what the moment needs of us. And I think that is a quality that's another texture of, like we're talking about, of being a man, is the ability to respond, aka responsibility.
I'd be curious to
It's
hear if you want to just touch on Systema. We don't have too much time, but I'm definitely
yeah,
curious about it.
oh,
And I would love
man.
as listeners as well to get access to it.
It's something so alive for me, and it's maybe just unique and weird to me, but so it had been in my awareness, like I was saying, it'd been in my awareness a few times, and spoiler alert, I have a Russian wife, so I've started to deepen in the Russian culture and understanding the history and tradition. And Sistema is an ancient martial art. I think it dates back to the 9th or 10th century, and it is both a spiritual path and also a combat training. But the entire foundation of it is how you can be is to be completely relaxed. They say it's 90% breath is the martial art, and so to be completely relaxed at every moment, and that all we're doing when we're in the like the self-defense or the combat training is we are taking someone's energy that they're throwing at us, and we're essentially redistributing or moving with it. And it's like a way of seeing the world, of moving through it with the most ease and the most grace, and just whatever the moment deals you, you're using whatever skills you have available to you to essentially make art out of it, to divert it into a creation or channel it into something. And so it so aligns with what we teach. And this past summer, we spent 2 months in Russia. I got to meet a bunch of my wife's family, and I was training for 2 months in Sistema in Russia. And this was my first experience of it, even though I know some friends that do it here in the States, and I don't speak Russian. They didn't speak any English. So for 2 months, I was training with these ex-military special forces Russian
Wow.
dudes. And it was, again, go back to humbling. That was a humbling experience. And but there was such a deep reverence and like camaraderie with those brothers, even though we didn't share a word. And so from that experience, I was hooked, reluctantly hooked, because I was so humbled every day that I went there. But then I came back and we ran a retreat here in Austin last week, and we had a Systema trainer of mine who's here in Austin come lead a session, and it was so beautiful to watch, because it was at the end of the retreat, like how well men actually did, because we had just spent 4 days like getting in our bodies and breathing and relaxing and clearing. And so they actually did like really well for first
Right.
time, because it forces the whole practice, like forces you to there's like an honesty about it, because you can't fake your body, you can't fake tension in your body. And when you get hit and you're not in that relaxed Systema way, it hurts. And yeah, so that's it. I'm like deep in it right now. I'm like signed up to work one-on-one with my Systema teacher and go to every class I can get my hands on, and then hoping to go back to Russia and train at the source for another couple months over the summer.
Yeah, this is just beautiful. And, I just consider as well just this other thought that came for me, which is this value of martial arts and exploring, experiencing, and developing a level of confidence within our physical body to know how to fight and to know how to defend ourselves when necessary. And it's definitely been something as well that I've been exploring more deeply in. And just hearing you, it definitely as well draws a level of curiosity for me. I don't know if you know this as well, but my parents are both from Russia. So I have that influence myself. So I'm as well intrigued by what you're saying. And who knows, maybe I'll check it out. I'm
I
curious if
might have just
some,
planted a seed.
yeah,
Yeah.
dude, like I mean, there must be as well a facilitator here in Bali. So I'm for sure going to check that out.
Probably.
So thank you for that. Chris,
Yeah, you're welcome.
we could continue on here for hours. Listen, like it's been, first of all, such a beautiful conversation. And I just want to as well acknowledge with a sense of amusement the tension that I'm holding just in the recognition that there's so many subject matters that we could go into. And for me as a host, it really requires this depth of discernment around what are we going to go into and what would be of most value to the listeners, and to as well have a level of almost softness with it, of not trying to control and steer too much, but also holding a little bit of that capacity to steer the ship. So yeah, I'm just holding it with amusement, and I really hope as well that the listeners have received a lot of value from it. But I just want to say thank you, Chris, for coming on here, for sharing your journey, for essentially what I felt was really you going back to that time a decade ago, right? And really feeling it and offering a transmission from where you are today. And you've as well just given so many lessons and insights and recognitions, and I really trust that listeners will receive a lot of value from it.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and yeah, man, we could do 100 episodes and we'd still have more. And I just the prayers that whoever this needs to reach, it reaches, and they get what they need out of it. And so thank you for creating the platform, and thank you for having me on it.
Thank you, brother. Before I ask you my final question, where can our listeners find you? And is there any offerings as well that you want our listeners to know about?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Two sites that I would direct people to. The first one is my name, chrismarhefka.com. It's my personal site with my one-on-one offerings. And then the second one is 13 Pines, like the tree, all spelled out, 13. And that is a company, a men's work movement that I started, and I run it with two other men, Nick Warner and Alan McGrath, which I think you know of or know them personally. Great men. And, our collaboration on this, our creation on this is an effort to do a similar thing to what you're doing with the podcast. We're doing it with programs, and we're doing it with retreats and events. And we do have a few things we're offering. We have a masculine foundations course, is like all the, like, really kind of like what we were talking about today, like all the things that like men need to get started on this journey. In fact, that's like a great this is really what we talked about, is like, how do we give recommendations for these guys? And so we're creating this this is the first iteration. We're going to be launching this 8-week foundations course versus just like blasting guys with all the options. We're just like, look, we're 3 guys that have come from 3 different lineages and paths, and combining our knowledge, like, this is the way. So for 8 weeks, you just follow the step by step. And that's like a good like introduction and starting point to men's work. Yeah, that would be a really great thing for listeners. And then, of course, I have one-on-one coaching. I'm actually opening up a 1-year transformation program, coaching program that's one-on-one and group coaching. I'm really excited about, because it's combining my entire life experience and journey into like a 1-year like deep experience. And that's something I'm enrolling in right now. That I'm very excited about. So
that all sounds amazing, and I'm sure as well going to put all that in the show notes. And yeah, just to comment as well on Nick and Alan, I've both had them on the podcast. I've already released the episode with Nick, and the one with Alan is going to be released. So yeah, we didn't get much time and space to speak about 13 Pines today, but we'd love to do that in the future. But this is where I would actually like to ask you my closing question, because from my understanding as well, you come from the backdrop of this retreat. I believe it's called Ascent. And you had as well leaders such as Dr. Robert Glover and John Wineland on there. And I'd be curious to hear, as a closing question, in a minute or two, I would like you to touch on, hear from you, what was the deeper thread or the theme you witnessed among the men that showed up? And if you could speak directly to the men listening now, what message would you want to leave them with?
Oh, it's such a great question. In this retreat, in many retreats, the thread is that men are actually much more similar than we think we are, and we don't have to fight this battle alone. And all men need is a little bit of space and permission to allow it. And it being like, whatever you're holding on to, brother, to be let go and let free, and to find a deeper part of yourself. And so, we offer that in our programs and events, but also, like, there's so many great, amazing places to find that. And that was the deeper thread. There was a through line of shame in this past retreat, and how much shame so many men carry, so much shame they carry, and how shame, only to be released, only needs to see the light. So it just needs to be spoken, it needs to be said, it needs to be seen in. And when we do that, we can be free of it. Because shame is it is the heaviest vibrational emotion that we have, that we carry. And so, finding a way to let go of the things that we're most shameful of by speaking into them.
Beautiful, brother. Yeah, I can absolutely attest to that. And just the importance, and as well the recognition that one will not find that safety everywhere. But I want to say there is an abundance of people that we can go to where we can as well share that experience. So I think that is a good place for us to close this conversation. Chris, thank you again for coming on. For all the listeners, I really hope as well that you got a lot of value out of this conversation with Chris and I. I for sure enjoyed it immensely. And for anyone that found value in it, I really encourage you as well to pay it forward to any man that you believe could receive value from it. And until next time, signing off.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Your time and attention is truly appreciated. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for my upcoming episodes. And in case you know somebody who would find this episode helpful, I encourage you to pay it forward. Finally, if you've personally been receiving value from the show, one way you're able to support this podcast is by leaving a 5-star rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Not only does this help more people find the show, but it also supports me in bringing more incredible guests on for the future. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and until next time, signing off.